So hello, everybody. Dan Sim here again, and I'm happy to have guest today, Shashank Varma. And Shashank, could you share a little bit about your background and who you are? And then we kind of want to dig into a little bit about going into building a startup and validating that. But first off, who is Shashank? What do you do? How did you get here?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I went to NYU, grew up in New York City, moved to Wisconsin about almost 9 years ago for Kohler Company. And I've been with them since. I've had two startups with one exit. I founded a thing called Innovation Accelerator within Kohler Company, which helps other teams innovate and helps invent kind of the cutting edge stuff for Kohler Company as well. So I love making things. I love building things, and it's always, not always, but it's been a passion since I can remember, since I was 10 or so. And I love business. I love the impact that businesses can have to people's lives and the environment and cultures. And so I love kind of the intersection between creation and business.
Yeah.
So product-based businesses I love those, I love those topics.
Okay. And you're doing that for Kohler internally, but I know that you have sort of a process that you've worked out for helping people refine their business idea, and importantly, kind of work through, how to validate whether your startup is a good idea. And that's a big topic. And I think you probably offer a whole series of boot camps and lectures on this kind of thing. But could you talk a little bit about that process and maybe give us sort of a high level of how it works and what process you go through to help people think through whether their idea is worth pursuing? Because I work with a lot of startups, and you hate for people to waste a year or two on a bad idea. How do you kind of validate the MVP early on?
Yeah, it's a really good, really important question. And so process is something that I've come to love. I used to think process would get in the way of creative thinking and creativity and things like that. But I've seen the value of constraints, and process helps you understand and vet things in ways that gives you confidence, not just to be able to talk about your idea, but to believe in your own idea. And so for whatever reason, when it comes to things like this, I just want to create formulas. Maybe it's because I'm a trained engineer, but I want to build formulas. I want things to be predictable, because I really get uncomfortable with the fact that, or I don't want to be in a position where I have to rely on luck or, things that are not under my control. So I want to be able to identify as many variables as I can, and then try to optimize them for whatever it is that I'm trying to do. So the process that you're talking about. So I forgot to mention initially, I do have a consulting business around this, because like you said, there's definitely a need around this stuff. And that consulting business is around helping startups through to product market fit, and also to help companies develop, strengthen their innovation processes or new product development processes. So the process, that I try to kind of push or share with people that are in startups or kind of in the idea stage or inventors, is really trying to take kind of a holistic view about what it is that they're trying to do. Vetting an idea in its own kind of little silo is very hard to make sense of. And what I mean by that is, if you don't understand the magnitude of the value of your idea, it's very hard to know whether a good idea is indeed a good idea. Generally speaking, most of us are sharp enough to know an idea has legs or not, enough to get to a prototype. Like, I think this will work because maybe this idea will solve a problem that I have, and that's a great place to start. And it can be a really good place to start, which is, what problems do I have? What do I struggle with? What could I do better? I hate how this thing works. Can I improve on that? It's a great place to start for a startup idea.
Yeah.
but it's not the end all be all. The kind of the hard part is to validate whether other people share that problem with you, and how many, and how big of a problem is it. It might be really annoying to you, but it might not be that annoying to 100 million people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the face of it, 100 million people is a massive market. So it's those nuances that you're trying to understand up front. So I typically have about 10 or 12 things that, I have an inventor or someone with an idea or someone who's developing an idea look at. And it starts with, typically it starts with an idea, right? They typically have, well, I think this is a great thing for a startup.
Yeah.
Rarely, I don't know if I've ever met anyone that starts with, I'm really interested in this space, like whether it's health tech or education, and I want to do something in that space. I'm looking for problems in that space that people have.
Right,
I think that's a much more robust, a much more valuable approach, because when you're not married to an idea, it's so much easier to see value that's not associated with your own, ego or your love for your own idea. So I try to kind of direct people to think about the overall space that they're interested in, because if that idea is a good idea and it becomes a startup that's merits growth, you're going to be working on it for at least 7 years. You got to think, 5 to 7 years of your life is going to be dedicated to bringing that to the market, to growing, to scaling. So if you're not in love with this space, if you don't find the space interesting, because your idea will evolve, it's not going to be what you're thinking it is right now. It will get shaped by the forces that you encounter as you move forward. So if you're not in love with education, or if you're not in love with healthcare or health tech, you're going to have a tough time. You're going to give up, and that's the biggest risk, is you just get enough friction and you just give up. So you try to kind of help them understand what spaces are your ideas applicable to, and how big is that problem. So identifying what is it that your idea actually does, why is that important, and how can we find the magnitude of that problem.
Sure. And I deal a lot with inventors, scientists, engineers, technical people, and I think they do what you just said, which is they have a solution, and
Right.
they're looking to see that they can address problems with it, and all they really know is that they think it's a problem. You're saying it's a little dangerous to be in love with your solution. You should actually be in love with the field you're trying to address, and objectively see what the problems are. So the other way around, look at the problems first rather than starting with the solution, which I think is what scientists and engineers usually do. They start with a solution they dreamt up.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's because we're trained that way. We're trained to come up with answers and not questions. In school, and and most of our life, we're just asked to have the answer ready. And I think the best startup founders are those people who are really good at asking good questions. So it's something that I've been working on personally, because I see the value in asking questions and asking good questions, because asking good questions ultimately leads to risk mitigation. It ultimately allows you to prioritize what are the first things that I need to focus on. Me focusing time on a logo or a name is not at value add in the beginning stages of a product idea. But if I'm spending that time figuring out how many people have this type of problem, and if I start talking to them, I realize, you know what? The problem that I'm attacking is actually not that big of a deal, but this other thing is, and I think I can do something about that.
Yeah.
That is, much more powerful than what I said before, which is what a lot of us do. We'll have our website ready, we'll have a logo, we'll have a beautiful name or whatever picked out. But that's not important. It doesn't matter.
So you have a process that you walk people through. Is this a little bit like customer discovery that you hear people talking about? I don't know if you know the business model canvas that people walk through, and interview a bunch of customers with open-ended questions to see if they have the pain points that you assume they have. Is that similar to your approach, or how is your approach different? So
yeah, it's very similar. I try to use a lot of jobs to be done theory in my approach with this, very upfront. So if we're talking about just someone's idea, then I'm trying to understand what jobs does that idea accomplish. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Jones Redone theory, but essentially it's looking at a product as something that's hired to do a job for whoever bought it. And so there are three components to that. And I think the reason why I really love this approach is because it splits up a problem into these three components. And most people, sometimes have a hard time understanding why problems are more important than solutions. And it's the components are, there's a functional part of your product. So what does your product actually do? So it could be like a cup of coffee, it's applicable to not just startups, but, just business in general. It could be a cup of coffee. The functional part of that cup is likely caffeine, right? It's designed to wake you up or make you more alert. But then there's a social aspect to it, which is how do I perceive others perceiving me when I'm drinking this cup of coffee? And depending on your target or depending on your friend circle, you might be looked at as, as someone who's just showing off. They don't need coffee right now. Why are they doing this? Or as someone who's working hard, or, they're looking after themselves or whatever. And then the third component is the emotional component, which is how do I feel about using this solution? So if I drink a cup of coffee, do I feel good about it? Do I feel guilty about drinking coffee versus something healthier, if there is a healthier option? I love coffee, so I can really knock it down. But breaking it down in those elements, those three components, helps you see all of a sudden and understand how your product not just solves a functional problem, but then it starts to address things like brand and pricing and who could your customer be?
Right.
Who could you see buying? Because again, when we start in the beginning, we think everybody's a customer and we want everyone to be a customer, but that's not the right approach. You want to find your customer. So if you're trying to target everybody, just like with anything in the world, right? If you're trying to target everybody, you're likely going to target no one. Yeah. You need to target whoever you understand best and whoever has the most to gain from your solution, and you balance that with whoever has the most to give you for what you're looking for. But to be able to talk about those things in ways that make sense, that's what I've learned since I started my consulting business a year and a half ago, a little bit longer than that, is just how to talk to them about this stuff so that it makes sense. Most of us are not, this is the first time we're ever going to own something from the beginning to the end and all the different facets of the business, and we're not even aware of so many of these things. So how do we start talking about it so that we understand, so for the business model canvas, I love that framework, but it's very generic and it's very hard to make it actionable, so that I know what to do next.
Yeah.
They're pretty generic questions. They're fairly broad and there are important questions, but if I've never done anything like this before, how do I go about answering them? How do I go and find the right people that I need to ask for help from? Or how do I get the answers that I need for, discovering an actual problem? And so, I have a little script that I typically have for people to ask about, their problem. And I don't have them. Huh?
For the interviews that they're doing?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that, they're not essentially saying things like, this is a great idea, right? You want this, right? How much do you pay for this?
Yeah.
This is a good number. And then they come back and they go, this is validated. Yeah, I got 20 people saying they would buy it. And this is the price. We told them this price and they said yes. And then you have a tremendous amount of inefficiency in terms of usage of capital, because many investments are driven by some of those validation exercises. And it was going to be a failure from the beginning, but they just didn't ask the questions the right way, and they didn't understand that they did it the wrong way until it's too late, and then they have to pivot. But my thing is, we want to mitigate as much of that risk as possible without investing a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, with a few $100s, can we figure out whether we should even start thinking about this, more? And so again, problem and then people. So let's find what it is that we're trying to do and who can we talk to? So let's stalk people on LinkedIn and Facebook and cold call them, message them, email them. And there are other approaches too, where you could buy ads to drive traffic to a website and get feedback that way. Would someone buy this idea?
Right. And you walk them through that whole process. I like the concept of jobs to be done. Is that, I seem to remember, I think it was Clay Christensen who talked about the milkshake at McDonald's. Like,
Yeah.
I am hiring this milkshake to do something for me. I thought he was a little crazy when he brought that up, but I think in the end he concluded that people needed something to do on their half-hour drive, and the milkshake takes a long time to drink and it keeps you busy.
Yeah.
So in terms of thinking, you may even ask them, why are you buying the milkshake? And they can't maybe answer it, but it's doing a job for them. It's keeping them active and satisfying something for a half hour. So that approach to get at what is the real need that's being met. I guess it's a little bit like the value proposition.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
and it's very hard to understand this, by the way. It's really hard to figure out jobs. In theory, it's very simple. What are they looking to do with that product? But it's very, very hard to figure out what it is that they're actually trying to do, because customers don't really know. It's very rare to know what a customer is doing or wants. I think Henry Ford said it best, right? If he asked his customers what they would want or what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse, and he'd never invent a car. So I think, it's very, very difficult to phrase your questions in ways that teases the information out. And it takes a lot of, essentially you need to be a qualitative researcher, and, you're getting a lot of raw information, and most people typically take it at surface value. Well, they said they want this, they want more colors, they want this, that, whatever. And that's obviously not the solution, almost never.
Yeah.
What you need to do is, why are they doing this? What are they trying to do? What were they doing before they even got here? What are they doing after? You're trying to paint as detailed a picture as possible with that raw information. And so the value proposition comment is exactly what you're trying to state. But with jobs, you kind of have this nice framework with the different ways of addressing functional, emotional, and social needs.
Well, maybe before we kind of wrap up on this topic, and be sure to put a plug in for your consulting business, because this is just the 60,000-foot view of what you help people do over a long period of time. But could you give sort of a concrete example? I mean, you said you had 2 companies with a successful exit, or maybe people you're helping, if there's something not confidential. Help us kind of understand this process a little bit with an example.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few in my head right now. I think when I was working on my startups, I did not have a process down like I do now.
Yeah.
It was really just kind of taking stock of what I did and why I did it, that looking back, it made sense, including, Innovation Accelerator work that I've done. We're trying to vet ideas, and we're trying to come up with something new that makes sense. So let me think here. So a good example would be an inventor who wants to make, a component for a boat. They had this idea. I don't know if I can share what it is, but it's kind of it's an idea where you're kind of in a lake or in a pond or a lake, or in a body of water, and you're anchored, and you put this thing out, and it's it kind of makes it more enjoyable to be in the water. And so initially, this inventor would do, or did, exactly what a lot of us would do: create a website, got a logo done. He got essentially prototypes made, and poured a significant amount of money into the idea without vetting who wants it, how much would they want it for, and why would they buy it, how would they use it. And so when I started working with this inventor, what we did was we kind of tried to, again, paint that picture of what's the problem, what are people trying to do here, why are they trying to do it, and let's try to understand the magnitude of the problem. And I go deeper into kind of this type of exercise where I'm trying to understand who else is doing stuff like this. Too often we just kind of get narrow vision, tunnel vision with our idea, and we don't even realize, oh, there might be someone else doing something like this. So looking at the competitive landscape, who else does stuff like this? Does something like this exist? And if it doesn't exist, why doesn't it exist? Where, we sometimes think, oh, I'm a genius for coming up with something brand new, but sometimes there's really good reasons why something doesn't exist. And mostly
people don't really need it that bad.
People don't really need it. That's usually the reason why. So if it doesn't exist, that might be a reason why. So how can we then, if that's not the case, how do we make sure that, people would potentially buy it? So then we talk less about the idea and how do we manufacture it and those types of things, but let's focus on distribution. How would people find something like this? What are they searching for when they would come across something like this? And so then you start thinking about, okay, then we will start looking at things like Google Trends. Are people searching for this term? Does the frequency go up and down during seasons?
Oh, sure.
Things like that. And then we'll understand, is this product a painkiller or a vitamin? Is it, solving a real problem, or is it enhancing what someone's already doing? A painkiller is what you want to do instead of a vitamin. Vitamin is, kind of an excessive thing and less urgent buy or something like that. Does your product rely on changing someone's behavior? Do they have to do something that they wouldn't do before just so they could, buy your product? Does this help them make more money, or does it help them save money, or is it entertainment? Again, I'm just trying to create some facets, add facets to their idea, making it more than 2D and more 3D, and just shape it.
Right.
And how easy is it to, I think we talked about buying, how easy is it to buy? What is your unique things? If someone else has a similar idea, I actually take that as a positive, because then there's some market validation. Some people are buying it. Then can I make it better? What's different about mine? So we talked about that. Well, what can we make about this that's unique, that doesn't exist in the market? And so we worked on, identifying in the hierarchy of needs for this particular idea, what are some things that, based on customer reviews, so that's stuff that's already out there information-wise, so we don't have to do a lot of customer development or discovery. Let's see what they want more of, what they want less of, and let's optimize for that. And then we start understanding things like price positioning, and all of that helps us draft the final value proposition. So we're trying to do this. It will help customers do Y, and it'll cost them this. They'll have to give up this to get their value out. But if we're not sure what their value is, and we just are assuming it, then it's a very, very hard sale. So we want to do a lot of that marketing work up front. And that's what helps strengthen an idea, because ultimately I also say, a product is maybe 10 to 15% of your business, but we think it's the majority of our business. And in the initial stages, it absolutely is, because you want to make sure that it's right, it's executed well, but it's a percentage of your overall business, and it doesn't exist. The business doesn't exist without the other stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's overlooked, especially by a lot of inventors. So, well, this is great. Thanks for sharing all this, Shashank. And can you maybe put in a little bit of a plug for your consulting business? I know if people want your help and they want a deeper dive, how do they find you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I have a website, a couple of websites, workframelab.com, or workframeconsulting.com. You absolutely reach out to me there. I'm on Twitter as well, VARMS9.